Hello friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works Workshop. Got a real cool build for you today. Has nothing to do with musical instruments, so if you're only interested in musical instruments, you can just go ahead and skip this video. But I think if you're interested in anything mechanical, you'll really enjoy this. I didn't show every step in the build because it would have just taken forever. It took me probably close to 2 weeks to get this right. And I just showed highlights and changes, and I explained what I do. But what it is a Skid Steer Brush Hog. I took an old John Deere Brush Hog and I converted it over to hydraulics. And it was quite a bit of work. I had to take it all apart, turn it around, cut pieces off of it, weld new pieces back on it to make it hook up to the Bobcat. Then I had to hook up all the hydraulics. And I had 2 iterations of the hydraulics. I first bought a small motor that had the right RPMs and everything, and even had enough torque probably, but it couldn't handle the high pressure of the Bobcat. And I didn't have a pressure relief valve. And anyway, you'll see all that stuff here in the video. I hope you enjoy it. Please take a look at it and, share it with your friends, comment, enjoy. Thank you. I have it in mind to convert this brush hog to a skid steer brush hog. Here's the plate I bought for it. I have a piece of steel just temporarily clamped on here. I thought I could mount this on there and brace it up. I have to take all this off up here though in order to do that. I've already taken the rear wheel off of it, and I took the drive shaft off here. I'll put a hydraulic motor in place of that and drive it with a hydraulic motor. I thought I would use an overriding clutch on that hydraulic motor, like you use on the back of an old 8N tractor or something that doesn't have an overriding clutch built in. And that way, that'll give that a freewheel spin when you shut the hydraulics off. That's one of the things I keep seeing is people have to put in a bypass so that the hydraulics, so that this can freewheel spin when you shut the hydraulics off. Otherwise, it comes to an abrupt stop. Anyway, I think that overriding clutch would allow me to do the same thing, and I've got one of those, so at least that's my plan at the moment. Right now I'm going to disassemble the rest of this stuff. I'm not going to show every step in the process. I'm just going to show clips along the way. Hope you enjoy it. This is not the best camera angle, but basically I'm making an adapter to go from a 21 spline yoke to a 1-inch steel shaft on the motor. So anyway, this is going to get welded to the spline, and then the other end will be the 1-inch with a keyway. I'm just boring it out right now at 5/8. This was a piece of scrap that just happened to be about the right size. I turned it down to 1 3/4 on the outside diameter, and then I beveled this where I'm going to weld it to the splined yoke. This is the part I'm making for the adapter between the hydraulic motor and the brush hog shaft that turns the blades. The shaft will protrude into this just a little bit, and this will get welded onto the yoke. I've got a splined shaft, or splined, this used to be a U-joint. You can see how you press the button here to hook it onto the shaft, onto that spline shaft that came off the brush hog. So this came directly off the brush hog. It's got 21 splines. I turned this shaft down to force feed it through here. It's not splined, it's just tight in there. It just fits tight. And I even put a set screw in it here. And what I did was I turned this down in my lathe so I could face this off perfectly square. And then the shaft on this end is turned down to this 1-inch diameter, which is the same as the motor. And I can put it on here, slide it together, and there's no play in it at all. And I can use this to weld it and keep it straight. My hope is that I'll hook this end straight into the brush hog, hook this end straight into the motor, the hydraulic motor, and we'll be off to the races. But when I weld this, if it doesn't stay perfectly straight, then, you know, I don't know, we're just going to have to back up and punt and maybe put a new U-joint of some sort in there. I would rather just stay away from the U-joint. If I could just make a direct drive like this, I would like to do it, but we'll see. I don't know what's going to happen when I weld this. Here's the current state of the hydraulic brush hog that we're building. You can see I've got the skid steer plate installed here, and I've taken, so far I haven't had to add any additional steel to this. These bars were the original bars that were on it, but of course they went the other direction. I've taken the gearbox off of it, and we're going to turn that around. We're going to face it back this way. It used to face that way, and we're going to face it this way. We're going to put the hydraulic motor on it and the hoses and things. I'm going to beef this area up right here a little bit more. I'm going to roughly take this piece of steel and come down from here down and over here also, and come down and beef that up a little bit, because I'm afraid that the pressure from the Bobcat could bend this right here with only these on there. So we're going to beef that up a little bit. I'm also going to beef up the sides down here. I'm going to put in some heavy angle iron in there, probably at least 1/4 inch thick, probably more like 3/8 inch thick, to beef up the sides, because they're kind of wore out anyway. And anyway, that's kind of the state of the union at the moment. I do have a hydraulic pump motor that we'll get into a little bit later and show you how all that goes together. I'm not filming all the processes and steps in this just because it would take forever. And you can see that we've got it. I bought the heavy duty skid steer plate. This one's a 1/2 inch thick, so it's pretty solid. These pieces of steel here used to be on the other end and held the 3-point hitch, and I just cut them off and turned them down this way, and they made great mounts for this. So we'll keep you informed as we go a little further. We're making progress on the Skid Steer Brush Hog. We've got the gearbox turned around backwards. I come up here closer and you can see that I've got my adapter on here that I made this piece here on the lathe, and with it also has a keyway in it to fit this motor and this shaft. Then this piece here was the original piece that was on here. I cut it off and machined it flat and machined this flat, so they both matched up perfectly. I made a shaft that went all the way through there tight, and then I had a professional welder weld this on a TIG welder. And it seems like it's perfectly straight. There doesn't seem like there's any run out at all. So you know, it looks good. I'm really hoping it's going to be fine. Now I've just got this mocked up. As you can see, I have this big piece of channel laying here on top of these beams. There's 2 beams there, and I have it just sitting there. And then that way I can put these, this is 1/2 inch steel here, and I can mount it to these 2 holes, weld that to there and mount that there, and then it's a very stiff, rigid mount. That little motor, it doesn't look like much, but when you pick that thing up, you know you've got something in your hands. It's very heavy. I mean, it's just crazy heavy for as little as it is. So it's pretty much just solid steel, and the PSI on it and the RPMs on it match what I think I need for this machine. The only things I don't know about on this are the bypass. I've been seeing on other people that are building this on the internet, they put a bypass valve in here so that when you shut the hydraulics off, this can freewheel. I thought about putting an overriding clutch in there, but that just adds one more joint to it and one more flexibility, and plus I need my overriding clutch for something else. So I decided I'm just going to try a direct drive like this approach, and I'll put those bypass or check valves or whatever you call it through here, so that going one way it's got power, and then when you shut the power off, it can circulate around through this somehow. I really don't know. Actually, it'll be up here. It'll be circulating straight through here, and as that's spinning. So that's my goal. Whether that's going to work or not, I don't know. We'll figure it out. If you ask people about this kind of stuff, they say, oh, you can't do that, or you can't do this, or you can't do that. Well, I don't ask, and that way I don't get told I can't do it. So I just do it, and when it don't work, I do something else. So this is where we're at. We got her all cleaned up. If I can get this mounted real soon, I'm going to go ahead and paint this puppy today, and then we'll worry with the hoses. Here's our finished build just prior to putting all the hydraulics on it. All the welding is done. You can see how we made the mount for the motor. The motor will mount right in these two holes here. We've already had it on there. It seems to mount up just fine. It comes off just fine. So all we've got to do now is put the hydraulics to it. But first, we're going to give it a good coat of John Deere green paint, since it is a John Deere Brush Hog. If we still need to get parts for it, we should be able to go to John Deere to get them. So everything looks pretty good. You can see how we strengthened up the sides here, and so everything's been beefed up on it as best we can. We'll see how it holds up. Well, here's the latest iteration, and I say latest because I had a different motor on here. I had a different motor that was mounted. As you can see, there's places here where we welded up, and over there, and we had it mounted about in here, and it was much shorter, which is what I liked. But that motor didn't have the power and or the pressure. This one can handle much higher pressure and more power, and you can see it's got the splines on it, so I had to come up with a way to connect these splines to these splines. These are 21 splines and these are 6 splines, and so I ended up, this old U-joint here had a square shaft on it. I turned that square shaft down to round, a 1-inch round, which is what I had in here for the other motor. I press fitted it in here, and then I welded it here. You can see I'm not the best welder in the world, but I don't think that'll be the weak point. There's a shear pin right here, which I only have a little tiny 1/4-inch bolt in it right now because I don't trust all my engineering, and I want that to break before something else. Now I have to connect up the hydraulic lines from here, come back over to here to a relief valve, and then from the relief valve up to the bobcat. But so anyway, the relief valve will be sitting in this general area. Anyway, I got some more hydraulic engineering to do. Well, here's the final iteration, and it's been tested. I know it works. Just give you a quick rundown. Of course, we had the old gearbox here from the original Brush Hog. Here is a shear pin. It's a 5/16 inch bolt. I had a 1/4-inch in there for testing, and the 1/4-inch never broke, so 5/16 is probably overkill. And then I kind of messed up here. This was the original spline U-joint that fit on here. I cut it off originally thinking I was going to go to a 1-inch shaft motor. That's the 1-inch shaft motor. I eventually had to weld that back onto a different U-joint that matched up to here to fit these 6 splines. All this works fine. Those welds are fine. I'm not a very good welder, but they're not going to be the weak spot. This should break, I would think, before this would. But you never know. I also made this pin here that goes in to connect onto this, because the pin was missing in this U-joint. That's just a little extra there that I had to do. Here's the motor. I got this from Surplus Center online. Surplus Center, I believe it's out of Nebraska, is an awesome place to get parts for hydraulics. And then all these fittings and connections I got at Napa in St. Robert, Missouri. And I got this from the Surplus Center as well. And this check valve is a one-way check valve, and what that does is lets the pressure off of the Brush Hog. In other words, when you stop the hydraulics up here on the Bobcat, everything would come to an instant stop. Well, with those big heavy blades swinging, if it came to an instant stop, that would break something or cause a problem. This lets those spin down. It only goes one way. It'll let you spin those blades by hand one direction, but you cannot spin them the other direction. And this up here, just so you know, is a relief valve, a pressure relief valve. And so what that does is the Bobcat pressure coming out of the Bobcat up here is much higher. It's like 3,300 psi. This motor can only handle in the 2,000 range. This reduces that down. I have not learned how to adjust this yet. I just used it straight from the factory. I don't know if that would help if I can adjust this to increase the RPMs, because to be perfectly honest with you, the RPM coming out of the motor is a little bit slow. It's not quite as fast as it was with the tractor, I don't believe. And the torque on it, therefore, is a little bit low. If you get into really heavy stuff, it will bog down, but that's kind of good in one way because it doesn't break the shear pin. So it's a pretty neat deal. So here's what it looks like from the front. And here's a view of it from the side. Sorry for the shaking camera. Now we'll take her out and give her a little test to show you what it actually does.